Why don't we go ahead and get started so we have all of the time that we need to ask these guys questions. So it will, like I said, it'll be a little bit of a different format from the other panels you may have been to. We want you guys to feed them the questions, and we'll let them, hopefully it flows kind of organically to make that work over the next hour. So why don't we just jump right into it. Let's first introduce them. So we have Patrick Cox, Rich Poulsen, Jeremy Bird, Grady Kelly, and Jeff Carter. Okay, each of them, I mean, combined, we're sitting on decades of experience here of hiring, working in teams, freelancing, probably every facet of design, product, whatever it is you're looking to learn from. I'm sure we've got that group here that we can pick their brains about. So let's give them a round of applause just for coming tonight, and then let's have our first question. All right, the floor is yours. What do we want to know?
Hey Mike, how do you want us to handle the mics? Is this going to be a...
So that's part of the unscripted approach. We won't touch the mics. Okay. I'll repeat the questions as they come, and we'll just let you guys go ahead and answer those. They should pick up you guys without moving. Okay.
So I feel like Sacra would be doing stuff.
Yeah, we have a question back there.
Just the first question, what skills are you guys looking for, and how would you love it?
Okay, so first question is the title of our meetup.
Just real quick, how many product designers do we have here? How many product managers do we have in-house? And what about development? Just out of curiosity, do you have any developers here? And what else do we have? Those that didn't raise your hand, what else? We have some students, okay? Just so that we can tailor our comments appropriately.
Is UX designer the same thing as product designer? Yes.
Oh, you're gonna open that right out of the gate.
Well, let's maybe look at that first question. Like, what are those skills that you guys look for, and how do you hire for them? Like, what is it? How do you evaluate those skills? Who would want to go after that first?
Go ahead, Patrick. I knew you were going to say that. What skills? Well, it depends on the level that we're hiring for. First of all, depends on. So for us, in my experience, it depends on who we're hiring. If we're hiring somebody that I want to help lead the team with me, then I've got to find somebody with different skills than like a junior designer, or somebody that hasn't done it. So, I kind of break it down into like 4 kind of themes, and I wish I had my cheat sheet with me because I can't remember them. You generally think in terms of like soft skills and hard skills. One of those 4 groups is my hard skills. Like I'll go through visual design, UX design, business strategy, writing, and communication. So like more of the hard skills and tooling. Like what kind of tools do they use? What kind of tools do they know? So those are like the hard design skills. The soft skills that I'm concerned with, regardless of skill level, is teamwork and collaboration. Mostly because, at least at Canopy, we've developed an environment where we try to be highly collaborative. That a designer doesn't go off on their own, like in their own box, and then come out 3 weeks later with this magical design, right? We try to be more facilitators and work with developers and PMs and QA and other designers on the team to get ideas. So it's a constant iterative process. And in my experience, I kind of run into 2 kinds of designers in that world. People that really like to collaborate, and people that want requirements and then I'll come back with the magic. And I don't think either of them are right or wrong. In our environment, though, we are highly collaborative. So we want people that know how to like talk to other people. One skill too is not getting offended. It's a skill that we require. If I give you feedback, or if anybody on the team gives you feedback, you better be willing to take it, especially from any skill level on the team, from junior to senior. So that's really important to us. Those are kind of the ones that go across. The other skills that we get into a little deeper depending on the skill level. So if it's more senior, we will kind of look for somebody who can be a mentor to the juniors on the team, somebody who can lead, and somebody who's had experience doing all of that over and over again, right? Like they've repeated that process a lot and are really honed in that. So experience does come into play. Again, when we're hiring like new people, juniors, like we don't even look at experience. It doesn't matter to us. So we look at more of the teamwork stuff and more of how we can grow and what we can add to them.
I think facilitation, you kind of briefly mentioned that, but I think that's really important, especially for like a mid or a senior level person, is kind of tying on the collaboration thing. Like design isn't done in an isolation, right? We have product managers, we have developers, and ideally we're working on cross-functional teams that we can all solve problems together. And so one of the things that I have people do when I'm evaluating a designer is I'll have them come in as part of the on-site interview, and I'll bring in, so I have product managers there, I have a developer there, and then myself, and we'll just give them a design problem to help just facilitate us all solving together. And it's things like one example was, improve the cooking experience for blind people. And we really just leave it at that. And then we kind of focus the scope in together, and really, the idea isn't a test of having them just narrate out loud. It's we want to see how they kind of lead the team through designing together, because that gives you an idea of how they would work with the team if we brought them on board. So that's one specific thing that I do, but I would agree, I think collaboration is huge.
How many people here work at a startup? Smaller company? Still going through and is in their A or B funding. How many people work here for a larger organization? Okay, a lot of probably 1,000+ people, right? The question that you ask is actually kind of complex, because, and Jeremy and I were just talking about this right before this meeting started. And when you look at, so when you approach a new employer, you have to keep in mind the needs of the employer, right? So if you're approaching a startup, most often than not, they're probably needing somebody that can contribute immediately, right out of the gate. They might not have the luxury to hire on junior, they might not have a mentorship program set up yet, right? There's some things that they need to grow with. If you are applying to a larger organization, right? Reaching out to that hiring manager and saying, what are your specific team needs? Sometimes we're looking at augmenting our team. So we might be looking for somebody that has deeper knowledge. You hear about these T-shaped models all the time, right? Where you're knowledgeable in a lot of things, but then you go deep in one of the areas. So we might be looking at that point in time for somebody that can help augment. So they might be doing user research, or they might be better at idea generation, or whatever it may be, prototyping. And so I think it's important to know your audience, right? So you need to make sure that when you are applying to these different companies, that you don't treat all of them the same, and that you're honest with your skill level too, of where you're at and what you're looking for. So just in addition to what these two said.
Great.
Yeah, I think those are all really good examples of every company is really going to have a really different view of what they need. And I think a lot of times designers need to keep that in mind, that just because you might not have been perfect fit for one place doesn't mean you wouldn't be perfect somewhere else, and that you don't need to change. I think the number one skill that we always look for at Rise Point is a term that Jared Spool talked about, which is called design. And what's his definition of design is the rendering of intent. So one of the things that we really look for is whether you're strong on the research side, strong on the interaction side, or strong on the visual, can you render your intent for the people who need to see the information you're going to present? So if you're a researcher, can you boil down everything into a presentable way that an executive could understand, or a developer, or a marketing person? Can you really render that in such a way
So when I look at portfolios, what I'm looking for is, can I easily scroll through your portfolio and see that you can render your intent over and over again, whether that's research, your interaction model, your visual design. And if I do, then I understand, if the person can do that, then I know that at any point they're going to successfully communicate to whoever they need to in the organization.
Excellent.
I tend to see if I can just get along with the person. You know, HR normally might talk to somebody, but one of the first things I look for is if we're going to get along well together. And because you're going to argue about doing something one way or another, or have heated discussion or whatever. And part of that is being able to take the critique. There's a couple people I worked with recently where you would tell them, hey, did you think about this? And they'll give you 3 fake UX rules why they didn't do that thing. You're just like, I'm just asking you to consider this thing. You know, I'm not putting the hammer down. And so I think being able to have those conversations and getting along and just joking around, I think is one of the more important things to me, aside from being able to do the job.
Great. Okay.
That's why you hired me, right?
That's why I hired Patrick. And I wish to see you hire me every now.
How do you move from, let's say, mobile development into different areas such as AI or machine learning?
Okay, so the question, how do you move from mobile development into like AI or machine learning? Okay.
Field, you know?
Are you asking about like what that career path looks like?
How would you, if you don't have experience in that area, how do you go about making that transition into an area, let's say, into another company where they are hiring for, say, product management or like a AI team or somewhere where that's needed?
Okay. So yeah, how would you guys go about instructing someone to take that career path?
So this is kind of what I did. So I actually studied guitar in school, in state design. And then I actually did systems engineering stuff first. And then the place where I worked at, they replaced us with software. And so I had to make sure I had a job. And so I scooted over to the product team. And I think because I had this creative background, it just went well to doing the type of work that we do. And so I just did whatever I could. I mean, I read books, I made my own projects. I did a lot of that. A lot of times when I've interviewed more junior designers and they ask me, how do I get more experience in this field? I'll tell them, go make a to-do list app or an email app or any of those crazy simple apps you see on the dribble, and go show them to your mom or dad or someone to get feedback. And I don't mean make a couple of screens, I mean make 20 screens. And I think the same would be true if someone was moving into development. Go make a web page, go build a website, go do the thing over and over, and then use that as experiences to having done that thing. Learn the terms, know how to speak to people that do that thing. There's a lot of guys that do like self-help stuff. They say you want to be a bodybuilder, go hang out with bodybuilders. If you want to be a Wall Street guy, go hang out with financial people. I think you just need to, being here at something like this full of designers, I think is one step towards that.
Go ahead. The other thing I was just going to say is one thing that's super important with any kind of design really is how you go about solving problems, right? That's one reason why a lot of managers like case studies, portfolios, or even if it's not super long, at least something other than the final design. And because if you can show that you know how to solve problems, it can take you and put you in any environment, and you're going to be able to adapt with a little bit of onboarding and stuff. And so, I think what Grady was saying is absolutely spot on. But also at the same time, if you don't have that experience yet and you're trying to gain it, make sure that in your interviews, in your portfolio, you really make it clear like how you solve problems, because that might make, I would rather hire someone who has, experience, really has a deep expertise in solving those problems, and doesn't just jump into mock-ups as an example, right? That takes the time to understand the business, understand what we're trying to do, understand what are the priorities, and then crafts the solution accordingly. I like to use the example of, I think a good designer is like chef, right? That you can take whatever ingredients he has in his kitchen and make something delicious, right? I think a good designer is like that as well, where you can put them in any situation, give them a set of constraints, a set of problems to solve, and they can create something great. And so if you can show that in your portfolio or in your interviews, then that AI design manager or whatever is going to take a chance on you a lot more than if you just tried to show the AI experience alone.
So we just went through this exercise not too long ago, and I want to be mindful that we have also others that are non-designers here, right? That what we're talking about is skill transfer, right? It's what can I take that applies to my current career and move it over into maybe some other area where I want to become more proficient or gain deeper knowledge in, right? And so whenever I'm working with career development, where I'm working with people that already, so this isn't the case where you already have a job and you're working with your manager and you want to move into a different area, is we put together a simple list of strengths and weaknesses. We do kind of a strength and weakness analysis. Where are you strong? Where do you feel like your strengths are? Where are your knowledge gaps? Because we don't want to discredit all of your experience that you have just because you don't know something about a certain field, right? So what I would recommend that you do if you're looking to make a move is to go talk to your direct manager, put together that analysis, and say, hey, this is some area where I'd like to improve in. I typically like to put a date on that of like, hey, in 3 months I would like to be here, in 6 months I'd like to be here. What are the things I need to do to get there? And so when we have identified those knowledge gaps, it makes it a little bit easier to say, oh, okay, so for AI or machine learning, right? You might, if it doesn't exist, that's one thing. That's a difficult jump to make, right? But if that team exists, generally it starts with reaching out to that team and saying, what in this 3-month time span or 6-month time span, whatever it is, my employee would like to make this transition. And now that's not always the case. There's not always a need for it, right? So you kind of have to build that need. But that's the discussion I'd have with your direct hiring manager and addressing it in those terms. So it's not this, yeah, I'm done doing development, I want to move over to AI per se, which has some components. So you want to do a skill transfer at that point. It's the same for product management to UX, UX to product management, management to development. There is so much that we have in common when working together that it's natural to want to make some of those transitions. And so that's where I'd start with that.
Great. Yeah, Jessica.
What things do your new hires do that make you regret your decision?
Okay, great question. So, wow. All right, so the question.
When I hired Patrick, I was sorry.
No, you're all right.
Yeah, he's got personal experience on both sides of this.
So let me just repeat really quick. So Jessica asks, what do the new hires do? Like, what are some of the things they have done that make you regret your decision?
I've never had a regret full hire.
My team's not here. None of that.
How about it, Patrick?
This is not recorded, right? No, I don't think I've had any. I don't think I've had any that I regretted hiring. I think I've liked everyone that I've hired. What have they done when they start?
Will they do that?
So I think one of the things is everybody's going. I don't know if it's always regrets, but there's always going to be some areas that, as a hiring manager, you may have missed. So there could be areas that you now have concern that you know you have to put an extra little bit of effort into. But I think the biggest thing that probably any hiring manager is concerned about is if the individual comes in and tells you that you're always wrong. So that sounds weird, but there's been times where I've either seen someone on my same level when I was a junior designer or middle-level designer and watched designers tell the director, "You're wrong. We're not going that direction. I'm going to fight you till the death," versus let's go in, have a conversation, understand what's going on, and present it back. So I think that can be the biggest regret, is when you have a conflict of either personality or direction. And it's not to say that every director is going to be right and they make correct decisions, but it's, can you have an adult conversation instead of getting mad and running around and backbiting to the other designers that the director's wrong. I think that's when regret comes in, is that if you bring someone in that becomes cancerous to the team rather than help building the team.
I would say to that, echoing off that too, the times where I feel apprehensive, like, ooh, did I just ruin my team? Is that same case. You have people that come in, I would rather, like, I'm the type of person that when I get a new job, I kind of hang out for a while and just kind of like, I have all these wonderful new ideas, but I kind of hang out to try to see if I can get a sense of the culture and stuff like that, and then inject these new things. I've had a few hires where they come in and they have a lot of ideas. They're full of ideas and they want to change everything. And they see the app and they see all the scars of our application, and they're like, "We can fix this and this and this." And I'm like, what did I do? Did I hire? I need somebody just to contribute to this. I think that's the time when I would get that I've been most apprehensive, but it's not often.
Well, it's hard to have buyer's remorse. I was thinking about this last year. You can't, even with a house or a car, you only drive it once. A house, you can't go live in it for a month before you buy it. It's hard to know. I don't even think you can pick out everything, when you hire somebody. There was one person that we had hired where I worked once, and that person just was really banging heads with development. And it wasn't, they're really great. I think they just clash because of their personalities. That's not something you can figure out. You can't have them talk to everyone in development and figure out who's going to clash with. They don't necessarily know what they're going to work on when they come. So it's difficult to move that out.
One other thing that kind of ties into what Patrick was saying, but is that you need to understand, like, especially in any job, not just when you're new, but especially when you're new, is take time to understand the business, like understand the history, understand why the design decisions that were made the way they were made, right? You may have something to add that you could have done it differently and maybe in a better way, but at least having that understanding, just like you would try to understand your users, understand the business, and make sure at the beginning of your employment and any project for that matter that you're really clear on that, because that will help you be able to contribute better. Sometimes if you just read about something or you look at something and you think, I can improve that, well, you don't have the context to understand why those decisions were made. So get that context. That's something. And so those situations, I've had people where they just come in and want to change things, and I don't understand that context, and that can be.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to change things and pushing the team.
Not at all.
It's how do you approach it with your team? Do you become a pain to your team, or do you become a pusher and a driver of that change?
Great. Let's go here and then we'll come over here.
Could you tell us about some of your more successful hires and what made them a great fit for the company and for their teams?
Okay, so the question was, can you guys tell us about some of your more successful hires and what made them great? What made them kind of thrive in those teams?
So I think there's a book out there, I don't know if any of you have read this, but it's called Radical Candor. And one thing that I've always appreciated in my employees, the people that I work with really closely, has been the ability to disagree, but to do so out of respect. There's another book, it's actually a program called Crucial Conversations, which is more of a vital skills, vital smarts training, which basically says there's the 3 Ps. When do you need to have a crucial conversation with your boss or a peer? And that is it a people issue? Is it a process issue? Or is it, people process, somebody say it? Now, people, process, or pattern. You know, and if you can identify in yourself, like let's say that you've, to answer the question earlier about, you know, about maybe employees that might not necessarily have, that I have regrets about, but it's people that become silent, right, when they feel like they don't have a voice, and that's something on me as a manager, that if that's the case, then I need to also, we have blind spots, right, and so we need to. I really love employees that are open with their ideas. That you know, there will be times when, you know, ideas, because it doesn't have a high enough ROI or whatever it is, cannot be developed, right? But people that are openly candid with their feedback, both for me, and they both receive it well and give it well, right? I think that's something that's a soft skill that we all need to learn a little bit better in our environment.
Great.
I think the people on my team that have been most successful, I mean, I think they're all successful.
Did you look at the camera when you said that?
Yeah, they're all successful. I think they're all successful. The people that I think are more successful from like day one are the people that are just hungry about everything. So they come in and they want to learn. They're asking a lot of questions, and that's regardless of skill level. You know, senior, junior, mid, whatever, whoever you are. Like if you just come in and ask questions about everything, like how does the business operate? Like back to the last question, like why is that stupid in the application? Like why did you do that? And then, you know, like those type of people I think are the more successful people quicker, because they ramp up a lot faster.
They're constantly learning, right?
Yeah.
Well, to that point, going back to the very first question of what skills do we look for, one of the things that always surprises me is when we have an interview and I kind of start out introducing the company, and they say, "What questions do you have for me?"
0.
And they say, "Well, I don't have any. Are we going to stay in this office?" And yeah. What other questions do you have? And there's nothing there. That's a huge red sign, right? It's knowing that the person might not be curious. Like I'd love in an interview process for someone to make me stop them from asking questions, because we got to get on with something.
Interview, yeah.
And so I think to that point, just being curious and always wanting to know, or I think the people who are the most successful are the ones that tend to come in and not do a task and then sit there and wait for someone to give the next task. They're just asking or naturally trying to find what's the next thing that they should work on.
We brought on someone recently, and I had told him that we're just now starting to do agile with our dev teams, and it's kind of hard. They don't want to necessarily do it and have things told to them by product and design. And one of the first things he did was he played foosball with them all the time. He's really good at foosball, so they love to play with him. And I just saw that made more, it encouraged them more to talk around design problems, because they played foosball. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but because they had that camaraderie around something that was outside of work, even though it was in the office, it made things a lot better.
Well, building trust with your team members is, I think, as quickly as possible. You can do that in the interview, you can do that other places, but yeah, those kinds of things, I think, naturally just add trust to other people. The other thing, that's a skill I think I learned over time when I interview, is always make sure I have a list of questions to ask them. I don't want to hire anybody that doesn't want to work at Canopy Tax, and so like that means you have to really love taxes. Doesn't mean you have to really love taxes. I don't. It wasn't my dream to work at a tax software company, but I want people that want to work there. And so people who come in and have, like, I've had people that ask me, like, where did your CEO go to college, like in an interview? And I'm like, that's a good point. I don't know. I'll ask them that. But those people that are naturally inquisitive or want to learn more, they, like, even if it's, this may sound terrible, even if it's fake initially, it shows the hiring manager that you kind of care about this job. The last thing that I like that will make you successful in any job is to just be like, oh, they're hiring me because I'm awesome. Like, no, I'm hiring you because you want to work here and contribute to my team. So I think that's an important kind of interview skill to have.
Just one more thing is emotional intelligence, right? You hear that word a lot. You know, there are some times where I've flat out had candidates disagree with an approach, which is fine, or take criticism the wrong way, right? We always want criticism to be constructive. That being said, I found that the most successful candidates have a high degree of emotional intelligence. They also have a sense of humor, right? I mean, we all work in high stress environments where we're constantly trying to meet a deadline or ship that feature or solve that problem. There's a budget associated with it. We're trying to keep the C-suite happy. Everything else that surmounts into the stress that can be work is to, again, I think some of these guys have nailed it right on the head, is develop that relationship, not just with your boss, with others throughout the organization, and don't take it so seriously.
And it's not just like work well with others kinds of things. It actually helps you be able to put out a better product, because if you're always having fights with your executives or your product manager or something else, you're gonna not be able to get value to your users as quickly and as well, and so being able to understand them, understand what they're trying to accomplish, what their perspective is on things, really actually helps you to get better results as a company together than if you just try to push through an idea because some article you read said that was the best thing to do. Right?
You went to BYU, Patrick.
Who was the BYU?
Kurt. Grady looked it up.
I looked it up.
Oh, really? You Googled it?
All right, we had a question over here
I
too.
changed my mind.
So whenever I've been fortunate to be on the inside track of seeing the hiring process from the hiring manager's side, or at least when I'm interviewing at places, there's been a couple of times where I know somebody that works there and they'll tell me what's happening in their thought process, and I always hear this one this recurring thing when they're going through the hiring process is that they're like, I don't see candidates do this. There's just this out of the 30 candidates they're interviewing, they have to say, I really wish someone would do this. You kind of understand that? Do you ever see that? I really wish that they would bring this up in their process.
So
that's kind of the
no. So your question is, what is the this, right?
yeah, what's the this? Is I really wish when I was going through the hiring process, I saw more of this.
Right.
Is the this.
So just to restate that. So being involved in that, you've seen being involved in the hiring process. You see kind of hiring managers. You see 30 people, and there's this thing that you wish that candidates did during that hiring process, whether that be that interaction they have with the teams that they bring in for the interview process, or maybe it's that open candor to just ask questions and feel comfortable in an interview. What have you guys determined that your this is? What is that thing that you wish those candidates did?
So I don't know what it is because it changes every time, and you probably won't know what it is either. When we're hiring, we look to find somebody that'll fill the holes in our team, right? Whether that be a hard skill like visual design or UX or whatever, or something personality-wise on our team. You might have a team with a bunch of they're really good designers. There's 3 of you. They're really good designers, but they're all kind of deadheads and nobody likes to play foosball. So somebody comes in and they're like foosball champ at BYU or whatever, and you're like, oh, this person is going to add something to my team, which is I spend 8 hours in my job every day, more than 8 hours, but I got to make that experience suck less. So the people that I work with, I want to work with. And so I've met candidates, this is going to sound really harsh, but I've met candidates that are perfectly adequate for the job, but I've fallen asleep in the interview or have drifted off. And when you go to when you go to talk with your team, so I talk with my team about everybody we interview, and then all my team there's been candidates where all my team is oh man, that guy was awesome, he was so good and everything like that, and they'll come to me and I'm like, dude, I fell asleep in the interview. How am I going to work with that guy if I fell asleep in the interview? Regardless if I had an hour of sleep last night, there's got to be some kind of level of connection there. And so I think it depends on what we're looking for at the time. So I don't know how to specifically answer that question.
Well, I don't know. It's borderline like pontificating.
Yeah.
But I really like the sports.
So I think one of my biggest things is just for an internship, we had over 90 applicants for our current internship. You know how many Medium articles I scrolled through? And you know how many look exactly the same? So what this thing that we always look for is, how does somebody stand out from the crowd? What did they do that's a little bit different? And I know that sounds like it means more effort on your part, but it also shows me that you actually want to work for me. That it wasn't just another link and you happen to apply, but you actually go that extra mile to stand out from the crowd. Because the funny thing is, I've just hired an intern. He's here, so hopefully I can point him out at some point. But he asked me today what stood out in my portfolio. And I said, I don't even know what's in your portfolio. Right? Like, they start blending together, especially if you do internships, because you see so many portfolios over and over again. So it's those individuals when you see either a skill or something in their portfolio that sticks out from them. Like you have something weird, like you worked on some crazy project and you were proud of it and talked about it. Now I remember you as the giraffe guy, right? Like there's been a lot of times we've got into things and said, why was that guy so excited about giraffes? Like that's weird.
And that becomes your regret.
It depends if he has a pet giraffe.
That guy's talking about giraffes all the time.
Right, but at least that person now is not just Bob, he's the giraffe guy, and everyone can relate to who that individual is. So they tend to stick in your mind a lot better. So for us, that is stick out more.
So, I can tell you one really specific thing, though, now that he brings that up. Is giraffes. The like crazy flamboyant like resume. I hate those. Like I don't care about. I'm trying to see if like you have the skill set. So don't try to show too much personality in your application because I think that can be a negative thing. But the one thing I know that everyone, especially with like the junior designers, is they present the problem in their case study. The long Medium article that I have to read, that I won't read, they present the problem. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom of that Medium article or that portfolio piece, and their visual element or whatever their result is doesn't actually solve that problem, or they can't speak to why it solves that problem, then there's not a chance that they'll go to the next level. I think that's probably the one thing I look for in any of that process.
Before you continue, it sounds like you're looking for some like level of obsession.
Excitement.
Yeah.
Also, the one other thing that's kind of closely related to that is some semblance of personal branding, which means like, what is your brand promise? What makes you different? What are you going to bring to the team that other people aren't? And also, what aren't you? What aren't you interested in? In what situation would you not be the right fit? Because as already been said, we're trying to match up needs, and so it doesn't mean that you're bad, but like when I look for jobs, I spend a lot of time on my even when I'm not looking for a job, I spend a lot of time on personal branding because when I do need to look for a job, I want the right employers to be attracted, and I want the employers that aren't going to be a good fit for me to not be interested. And so thinking about what you don't want, the environments you don't want to work in, the kinds of projects you don't want to work on, like that can actually end up strengthening and helping you with your job search.
Know your audience.
Yeah.
Great. Just to add to that, to you, Mariah Hay, VP of Product at Pluralsight, she has really inspired me with, I think, something that piggybacks on what each of you has said, and that is design the way people experience you. Like if that can stand out, if that can be something that is your brand, like that experience people have of you, that's kind of something I've been obsessing over. Like how do people experience me, whether that be on paper or on a resume or in person, whatever that is, like design that experience. Where was that hand? Right here.
Piggyback on what you guys were saying just now, how much stock do you put in between a portfolio, a resume, a cover letter, and within that, skill versus personality?
Okay.
No cover letter. I'm weird. I will never read a cover letter. I'm also weird. Hey, I'm being transparent. On the resume, the thing I'm looking for on the resume is their portfolio link. Like when I get a resume, I look for their portfolio link, and then I go directly to portfolio. The thing I look for on the resume is, are they qualified for this job? In that every time I open up a job, and I don't know if you guys get this, I get architects applying for the job, and I get product managers applying for the job of designer. I get anybody who wants to work at Canopy applying for my job. So that means like they're trying to get they're trying to find a network person to talk to when they apply. So I quickly just scan and be like, oh, they kind of know what they're talking about. Where's their portfolio link? And then I go there. I put a lot of stock in the portfolio, and then after that, it's the interview. The interview is hands down the #1 thing for me.
I think one of the big things too is if you can talk about the craft well enough. Because I've sat in interviews and I'll ask, well, if they did a design challenge of some kind, well, how do you think your design challenge solved the problem? And if they say things like, oh, well, it's so much more user friendly, and it's so much more, this or that buzzword. And I've told a couple of people this, but it makes me think of on Food Network, we had Food Network Star. There was an episode where Bobby Flay was getting on to this guy for calling the food delicious. He's like, quit saying that, And my kids that were in the room were like, why? Don't they want the food to be delicious? And I was like, well, but you don't like tuna fish, and you like this, right? So if you could say tuna fish is delicious, they would never believe you, right? It doesn't make any sense to call it that. But if you can talk more to why maybe you took the design challenge and you actually showed it to people. We've had people do that, where actually user tested something that they designed for it. If they can talk to the realness of that instead of BSing their answer, then it's a big deal.
Tuna fish, cabbage, and LaCroix, all terrible. Throw that out there.
That would have been a regret for me too.
Any other responses to that? Or good. Okay, we had one back here.
Yeah,
Sorry, there's a lot of hands coming up.
Patrick, picking a little bit. You talked a little bit, and for anyone, I look around and I'm seeing a lot of diversity. How do you handle it? Or what would you tell someone who hates foosball? Maybe they do some different things than you. Maybe they look a little different than you. How do you handle that interview? And is diversity important where you work? And for all of you, like, how do you do that?
Yeah. At Canopy, I don't know who's met my team. None of them look like me. Well, Jason might a little bit. When I first started hiring, I was like, I'm never going to hire me. So I'm going to hire the stuff that complements me and the rest of the team. So I guess knowing that ahead of time, like knowing what we want or that hole to fill is something we have to define ahead of time. And we kind of do that as a team. It's like, okay, where are we at? Do we need from experience, like do we need a junior person, a senior person, mid-level person on the team? Not only on the skill that they're going to do, like the team they're going to work on, but what else are we missing? So when I first started hiring, I looked for my first hire. So an example, my first hire, who knows Dane and Clark? And I love Dane and Clark. I work with him in structure. He is exactly opposite of me. And when I first started hiring designers, he was the first person I thought of, because I thought, okay, I have these strengths, and I have these strengths, and I have all of these weaknesses, and he fills all of these weaknesses. And so I try to always look at what we're weakest on, and then that's what I pick out for the people. So it might be, one time it might be foosball, right? Or it might be visual design, or it might be, it might be giraffes, or it might be culture. Like I don't know if this is like an HR violation. I might get in trouble, but I look at cultural things too when we talk to people. Where did they come from? Where were they raised? I worked for a lot of companies where everybody I sit next to graduated from BYU, from the CS department, and it's like we're all this. Like I didn't. I would never graduate from BYU. But yeah, I went to many colleges, guys. Not one was BYU. But you look around, you're like, it just homogenizes everything, including the product, right? So when you hire somebody with any level of diversity or any level of difference in you, like they have a beard, I don't have a beard, they're female, I'm male, like that adds something to the team. And so we try to keep that balance of like where are we tipping too far in one direction?
I will say diversity is a multifaceted thing, to Patrick's point. That being said, you always have to hire for best fit as well, right? There's going to come times where it comes down between two candidates and they both bring equal strengths and something to the table that's unique to them. And it comes down to, is this person going to be a great cultural fit? Are they going to be happy here? I mean, so often I see, and this is becoming a trend, it's kind of scary, people staying at companies for less than a year and moving on to the next thing because they didn't find the right fit. That's the last thing I want to do, is hire somebody on that in a year from now they're like, I don't love it here, right? I want them to love the products we're working on. I want them to love the contributions they're making. And so it's kind of a two-way street, right? I think it's just as much responsibility on you as it is the hiring manager to find that right fit and to turn down the opportunities that you know you're not probably going to be, you don't see yourself working at in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. I know that's kind of scary to say that, because that just seems, oh, I'm pigeonholing myself into a place. But no, you actually get a lot of depth, domain knowledge, and you actually start to become more diverse as you get to know people, right? Because at the beginning, you might not actually show all your colors, but as you get to become more familiar with your team, that just creates a tighter knit bond, and you create better products that way.
Who remembers Saved by the Bell? Yeah. So I gotta have the Saved by the Bell philosophy with the team. If you notice, they're all stereotypically different than each other, but when they unite, they can take Belly down quick, right? So like you need all of the strengths. You need a Voltron. You know that we kind of have this like Morphin Time thing we have. It's really stupid, but it's like Power Rangers kind of thing, right? They all have their different strengths and different backgrounds. I love that they're all laughing. This is not a comedy bit. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses, but they come together to create the Megazord to take down the bad guy, right?
Are you the White Ranger or the Red Ranger?
What am I? No, I'm. We defined this one day. I can't remember. I'm not the Pink Ranger.
That's okay.
For sure. Yeah. I know that's what you thought.
You can be any.
Any other responses to that? Okay, we have a question over here, and then we'll come over here.
Standing out. So I think in other job positions, if you're switching over, when you apply to a job, you contact HR, like on LinkedIn, you send them a message. Is that the same in the UX field? Do you still have that hunger to connect, or is it kind of like what your portfolio do?
So yeah, I'll just repeat that. So when you're applying for, say, UX, do you still maybe you can repeat that a little bit. Like, do you?
So when I've applied for positions in the past, usually you try to network with the person that you're trying to get hired. But there's also this thought that let my portfolio speak for itself. Like if they want me, they can help me. Let me be forceful, send me messages, connect with you on social media.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when you're out there applying, I think we've all kind of run into that. Like, do we just let the portfolio do the talking for us? Do we be aggressive about the people we reach out to? Do we find those employees that work at Canopy and say, hey, how do you like your job? Like, how aggressive do you get in that process? Or do you just say, I have crafted a portfolio where I do feel like I stand out. Do I let that do the talking for me? Like, what works in those situations for UX?
I think you should absolutely leverage the networks that you've already had. But when you're looking for a job, it's probably the wrong time to message someone that you've never talked to in your life and say, hey, will you write me a recommendation to this job? Like, networking is a very effective way, and it really depends on the size of the organization, the hiring manager, how busy they are, everything. But typically, like most people, also, I guess I'll just speak for myself. I like hiring people that know someone on my team, that someone on my team can say, you should hire this person, they're really good, over someone that just sent me their portfolio and I've never talked to in my life. And so, but it takes some time to develop those kind of relationships to where that's effective. But it's something that I think you should always be working on, right? And coming to events like this, meeting new people, developing relationships so that when you have that need, you can call Patrick up and say, hey, Patrick, I'm looking for a job. Do you have any availability on your team? And he's like, oh, yeah, I'll create a position for you because I know you're really good or whatever, like that. But that's way different than just like hitting up a cold calling a hiring manager out of the blue and trying to get an interview.
Yeah.
So on the piece too of standing out, you can always stand out in two ways. One, really good, and one, super annoying. And most of the time people stand out when you're trying to connect and you're trying to have a text message with them or an email every day. We don't have time for that. So I think there's good ways of standing out. Did you come in for an interview and then they said, well, it might take a week or two. Did you send a nice little thank you note? Or I like cookies, so if I interview you, send me some cookies. Right? Like there's more approachable ways than hounding them every day of when are you going to give me an answer? When are you going to give me an answer? Do you have any more questions? Do you have this and that? So I think standing out in an intentional way, not in an annoying way, is really the main thing to focus on there.
I think asking questions in this event is standing out. Like, I haven't, so to be honest, I haven't had an actual like legitimate portfolio in 6 years. Like Grady, you saw my portfolio, it was just bullshit. Like it wasn't anything.
I was gonna say something different, but not.
Yeah, but like I think your first job or your first couple of jobs, I think your portfolio is huge. But I think it has to show who you are at the same point, and the work that you do. But after that, you have to rely on the actual work you do every day and not rely on your portfolio. Like I mean, I talked about earlier, like I put a lot of stock in the portfolio when we're like cold hiring people. Like if I don't have anybody in my network to contact, then we put that thing out and I look at their portfolio. But I would say at least half of the people I've hired on my team have some connection somehow to me. One of them, I had lunch, I met a couple times, we went and had lunch 6 months before, and he was a really great guy. I got along with him really well. We weren't hiring at the time. And then when 6 months after we started to hire, I was like, dude, I'm going to hire that guy. And then if I can avoid opening up a job posting and going through that hassle, that's fantastic, right? So I've always got like a short list of people. Some of you are on that list, so I'm not going to tell you who it is. But I've got a short list of people I want to contact and hit up. Most of the time when you contact them, they're like, no, I'm happy here. I'm good, and you're like, okay, well, I'll catch you next time. But most of that standing out, I think for me, personally, happens in these like events, at like the lunch events. I love going to the lunch events, doing those. People that randomly hit me up in LinkedIn with a weird question, or people that want to like come shadow, like you came and shadowed with us. Like those, that's how I get to know people, is in real life, like real situations. I think that's how you stand up. Awesome.
I would just add to that, I was at a meetup with Patrick, and Patrick had already filled some positions and asked me about some positions we had opened here and had people in mind that he recommended to me that contact me. So I think a lot of that does happen at these types of events. Let's take one on this side over here. We may just have time for just a couple more. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
I thought we were here till 9.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
Are.
It's 7 o'clock right now, so we'll take just 2 more questions and we'll wrap things up.
I'm a student, myself, there were some students here. Taking into mind the acquiring of skills, what stock or how much consideration do you give how they acquire? A boot camp versus college versus self-taught? What's your...
So the question was, he's a student and there's this process of acquiring skills. how much stock do you take into how they acquired those skills?
Yeah, I don't think acquiring skills is the issue. It's the exposure to those skills. So have you been exposed to those skills for 2 weeks or 2 years? There's a lot of value in having someone that maybe has acquired skills, but maybe they were artistic in school, in high school, and they took a lot of art classes then. So I think sometimes you can't just say, is this a 4-year degree person, or is it like a dev boot camp type place? Like, which of that is better? It's what skills, what kind of exposure have they had over the years. So boot camps can actually be a great finishing type event, that someone has all these rough skills and needs something to kind of clean it up, where other individuals might not be exposed to design at all and might need to go to a 4-year degree. So I think it's less about how the skill was acquired, but how long has it been used, and how efficient are they at that skill.
Anybody else?
I don't care. As long as you have the skill, it doesn't matter to me.
We want at least to some level, right?
Unless they went to BYU.
No, I think, yeah, we have a couple people that went to BYU. So I don't care.
All right, we have time for probably just one more question. Let's take back here.
My question is, just as hiring managers, I assume that you have in your mind some concept of like a persona of what a junior UX designer is, and especially like the ones that you have hired. My question is, for you is, what would be your prescription to that person that didn't land the job, that showed promise but wasn't quite there yet?
So, great question. So, yeah, what would you guys prescribe to that junior UX designer that's trying to enter that field and didn't get the job? What would you prescribe to them as, this is something you could work on, or this is what I noticed during the hiring process? What could you offer to them?
So I wish I had the time to disposition every candidate. I really do. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to always do that. Right? And so oftentimes when we're making gut checks and quick decisions, I would say this. Anytime that you've been, a phone call hasn't been returned, or anytime that you haven't got the feedback you wanted on your portfolio, obviously, it's natural to say, was I not good enough, right? Don't ever think that way simply because there's always the right time, right fit, right? Sometimes we're hiring for one spot, and it really comes down to, we had 200 applicants, right? And we're trying to find the right fit for the right time with the right experience, right? I would say that for anyone that feels like they lack the experience, something that has greatly benefited me in my career has always been going out and finding a mentor. Finding somebody that can give you that one-on-one time, right? And I think we're kind of doing that with the UX program, right? Where they can give you more of that direct feedback. Because the hiring manager's not going to have the time. And sometimes we don't have the time to even mentor our own people that we have on staff, which we wish we had more time for, right? So I'd say find a mentor and or a peer, somebody that can give you more of that one-on-one feedback.
What I love about that comment too is too many times I think we try and crowdsource our portfolios and our resumes to hopefully the community can tell us what it is.
Get it, right?
And sometimes the feedback there isn't coming from the people who are going to hire you. So I think to that comment of finding a mentor, finding someone that you can trust, they're going to give you more candid feedback, more appropriate than just, hey, everybody look at my portfolio and tell me what's wrong. Might not be the right way of really focusing on the people that you respect their opinion and go get it directly from them.
I've said this before, but I think just doing more of the work. I mean, I even have some freelance stuff I'm doing after we leave here. And I have a startup idea that I'm working on the weekends. In job interviews, I'm asked, what do you do when you're not designing? I'm usually designing, because I just love the work that much. And so I think if you're looking to have more experience in making yourself appear however better in whatever way you think you need to improve, I think that's a good way to go, because that's helpful.
You're supposed to say golf, go golfing. So I
hate golfing. I hate football.
Put down your guitar and play some top golf every once in a while.
I can do that. Just guitar and golf.
Great. Any other responses to that?
I was gonna say ask the hiring manager. Like there's certain things like our HR people department won't let me talk about, you know, like, but yeah, I would say if you didn't get the job, like ask them for feedback. Hopefully they'll give it to you. I mean,
even before you didn't get the job, like that's actually one of my favorite interview questions is, what concerns do you have about my candidacy that I could address before we leave?
It gives you a chance to respond.
It gives you a chance, because then you're in the interview, you have a captive audience essentially, and you know you can usually tell if they get all like nervous and don't want to say anything, or maybe sometimes, you know, if you have someone that will actually give you that feedback. I've had candidates ask me that before, and I've given them open feedback about it.
hiring people is what keeps me up at night, not anything else. I usually sleep pretty good from like the business standpoint. But when we're hiring, like I'm like stressed out. I'm like a freak show. Because it always comes down to like 2 or 3 people that are all good, and then you have to try to edit that, right? Like you have to try to figure out why. And it's like, well, I would hire all of these people today if I could. Like at one point, I did ask if I could hire 2 designers because I couldn't make a decision, and the financer was like, no, 1. So I think knowing that on your end when you're looking for a job, just knowing that like if you get turned down, like you were talking about, if you get turned down for something, it's like it's just not quite the right fit. Like, and they had to make a really hard decision in most of the time. So keep that in mind too. But yeah, always just ask for feedback from them. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, we are out of time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. Here's the thing, though. I hope that through this meetup that we've done, this panel, that you guys kind of see here that we're all just having a discussion. I hope that if there's something you didn't get to ask tonight, a lot of hands were up. We didn't have time for everybody to have their questions answered, but each one of these guys is active on Slack, or they are available to talk to, you know, right now if they're not leaving. Like, that's what this should be about. It should be this open forum where we feel like I can Slack Jeff later and say, hey, you said something earlier that really resonated with me, and I just had a couple questions about it. What better way to start building that network, especially for some of the students? I see a lot of students that are in here right now, and it's like, now is that time. Now is your opportunity. We ran one of these panels just about a month ago for a different event, and it was fascinating to see people connect through social media or through LinkedIn or through Slack and just start to make those connections. And I hope and I encourage that each one of you will do that as well. So, you know, if you can stay, if not, I understand, but, you know, stay here for a few minutes and mingle and figure out, hey, something resonated with me. If you don't have time, Slack them. Slack someone that you met here. So let's give the panelists a round of applause.